cockpit temperature hit 110 degrees. Sweat poured down Dewey Whitlock's face, stinging his eyes, soaking through his flight suit. His hands trembled on the control stick, not from fear, from the vibration. The Wildcat's engine screamed at full throttle, every rivet in the airframe rattling like it wanted to shake loose. Above Wake Island, December 11th, 1941. 4,000 feet. 6 American fighters had climbed into the morning sun 20 minutes ago. Now there were 3. Duke saw the Zero before his brain could process what it meant. A flash of grey-green paint, red circles on the wings closing from his 7 o'clock position. Too fast, too close. The enemy pilot knew exactly what he was doing. Duke pulled hard left, felt the G-force crush his chest, watched the horizon tilt vertical. The Zero followed, tighter. Impossible turn radius, like it was painted on rails. Duke's wingman, Charlie Brennan, was supposed to be covering that angle. Duke keyed his radio. Static. He craned his neck, searching the sky behind him. Found Charlie's Wildcat 300 yards out, found the second Zero on Charlie's tail, found the tracer rounds punching through Charlie's engine. Cowling, orange flame erupted, not gradual, instant. One moment Charlie was there, the next moment his aircraft was a fireball tumbling toward the coral reefs below. Duke's throat closed. His vision tunneled. The Zero behind him opened fire. Bullets tore through aluminum like paper. The sound was wrong, not the clean punch of target practice. Ragged, ripping. Duke felt the Wildcat shudder as rounds walked up the fuselage toward the cockpit. He shoved the stick forward. Negative G. His stomach lurched into his throat. The Wildcat dove, too steep. The engine coughed. The airspeed indicator wound past redline. The Zero followed. Still firing, still closing. Duke pulled out at 2,000 feet. Felt the wings flex, heard metal groan. The Wildcat was built tough, but there were limits. He was testing them. The Zero pulled out smoother, tighter, gained another 50 yards, 4 seconds. That's how long Duke had before those guns found him again. He kicked right rudder, skidded sideways, not a proper turn, a desperate slide, bought himself 2 seconds. The ocean filled his windscreen, white caps, deep blue water. If he went in, nobody would find him. The Zero's pilot was better. Anticipated the move, corrected, lined up the shot. Duke saw the gun flashes, felt the impacts. The instrument panel exploded. Glass and metal fragments peppered his left arm. Pain, sharp, immediate. He dove again. Steeper. The Wildcat wasn't built for this. Grumman made them sturdy, but this was abuse. The airframe screamed. Duke screamed back, pulled up at 800 feet. The ocean spray wet his windscreen. Too close. Way too close. The Zero was gone. Duke's head whipped left and right. Empty sky. Where did he go? Zeros didn't just leave. They hunted until you were dead or they were out of ammunition. Then he understood. The Zero pilot wasn't chasing anymore because there were easier targets. Duke looked up, saw 2 more Wildcats twisting in the sky, saw 3 Zeros working them like wolves on wounded deer. 1 Wildcat nosed over, streaming smoke. The pilot didn't bail out, just rode it down into the Pacific. That made 3 down, half the flight. Duke's radio crackled, someone shouting coordinates, someone else calling for help. The static cleared for 5 seconds. And Duke heard his squadron commander's voice, clipped, professional, ordering the survivors to break contact and return to base. Duke turned for home. His left arm throbbed, blood soaked through his sleeve. The instrument panel was destroyed, airspeed indicator gone, altimeter cracked, oil pressure gauge spinning uselessly. He flew by feel, by the sound of the engine, by the angle of the sun. Wake Island's airstrip appeared below. 1,000 feet of crushed coral. Duke dropped gear, prayed the hydraulics still worked. They did. He touched down hard, bounced once, settled. Rolled to a stop at the end of the runway. Ground crew ran toward him. Duke sat in the cockpit, hands still gripping the stick, and counted holes in his wings. 17. 17 times the Zero's guns had found him. 17 times he should have died. He climbed out, his legs nearly buckled. The crew chief, a crusty gunnery sergeant named Morrison, looked at the Wildcat and whistled low. "How the hell are you alive, Lieutenant?" Duke didn't answer. He was looking at the sky, at the empty spaces where Charlie and the others should have been. Half the flight lost, 4 men gone, and Duke knew with absolute certainty that this would happen again and again, until someone changed something fundamental. This is the story of how a grinder's kid from Kentucky changed the air war over the Pacific, not with better flying, not with more experience, but with one question that nobody in command wanted to hear. What if we stop trying to outfly them? What if we change the game entirely? Harlan County, Kentucky, 1934. Before the war, before the Zeros, before everything. Duke's father worked 12-hour shifts in the coal mines, dark, wet tunnels 2,000 feet below ground. Came home every night, covered in black dust, coughing into a rag, counting the dollars that barely covered rent. Duke was 16 when the tunnel collapsed. 16 men went down that day. 11 came back up. Duke's father wasn't one of them. The mine company paid $700, called it an accident, moved on. Duke's mother took work at the textile mill, sewing uniforms 12 hours a day. Duke dropped out of school and got hired as a grinder at the railroad yard, filing down rough welds on track sections, $8 a week, hands bleeding by Friday. But it was money. It kept the lights on. He was 22 when the recruiter came through town, Navy, looking for young men who could handle machinery, who could work with their hands, who didn't quit when things got hard. Duke signed the papers that afternoon. His mother cried, not because he was leaving, because she knew he wasn't coming back to the mines. Basic training at Great Lakes, boot camp. Then the Navy looked at his test scores and said he had potential. Asked if he wanted to try for aviation. Duke had never been in an airplane, had barely been out of Kentucky, but he said yes. Pensacola, Florida, February 1941, flight school. They put him in a Stearman biplane and told him to take off. Duke pulled back on the stick and the ground fell away, and for the first time since his father died, he felt something other than anger. He felt free. The instructors said he was adequate, not brilliant, not a natural, but steady, reliable, the kind of pilot who followed orders and brought the aircraft back in one piece. Duke graduated in October, 312 flight hours logged, no academy pedigree, no connections, just a working-class kid who learned fast and didn't complain. The Navy sent him to Wake Island in November, a tiny atoll in the middle of nowhere, a handful of buildings, a coral runway, 12 F-4F Wildcat fighters. Duke thought he'd spend 6 months doing patrol flights and go home. Then December 7th happened. Pearl Harbor burned, the Pacific exploded, and 4 days later Duke found himself in a dogfight against a Zero for the first time. That's where the math went wrong. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat, 1,200 horsepower, climbs 2,265 feet per minute. Good plane, sturdy, but heavy. 6,700 pounds empty weight. Add fuel and ammunition and pilot, and you're pushing 9,500 pounds. The Mitsubishi A6M0, 1,100 horsepower, sounds worse on paper. But here's the problem. The Zero weighs 5,100 pounds, 1,800 pounds lighter than the Wildcat. That weight difference changes everything. The Zero climbs 3,100 feet per minute, turns inside anything America built, stays in the air twice as long. In the first 3 weeks of the war, American naval pilots learned a brutal lesson. If you dogfight a Zero, you die. Duke learned that lesson watching Charlie burn, watching 3 other men spin into the Pacific. The numbers didn't lie. December 1941, 37 American naval pilots killed in 3 weeks, most of them in Wildcats, most of them trying to turn with Zeros. Back at base after that first fight, Duke sat in the ready room with the one other survivor. Nobody spoke. What was there to say? They'd done everything right. Followed doctrine, maintained formation. The Zeros had simply been better. The squadron commander called Duke into his office 2 hours later. Commander Harris, 44 years old, academy graduate, 20 years in the service. He looked at Duke's after-action report and frowned. "Says here you broke formation." "Yes, sir. The Zero was on my 6. I had to maneuver." "Says you dove below minimum safe altitude." "Yes, sir. It was that or get shot down." Harris set the report down, leaned back, studied Duke for a long moment. "You're alive because you got lucky, Lieutenant. Not because you made good decisions. Breaking formation gets pilots killed. Diving that low gets pilots killed. You want to survive this war, you follow procedures. Duke's jaw tightened. He wanted to say that procedures got Charlie killed. That doctrine meant nothing when the enemy aircraft was faster and more agile and flown by pilots who'd been fighting in China for 3 years. But you don't argue with commanders, you say yes sir and shut your mouth. Yes sir. Harris dismissed him. Duke walked out into the tropical heat and realized something fundamental. Command didn't have an answer. They knew the Wildcats were outmatched. They knew pilots were dying, but they were stuck. Locked into thinking that demanded you fight the enemy on his terms. That night, Duke couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk on the carrier and listened to the ocean. Thought about Charlie. Thought about the 0 on his tail. Thought about the numbers. If we can't turn with them, if we can't climb with them, what can we do? He pulled out a pencil and paper, started sketching. Angles of attack, energy states, altitude advantages. The Wildcat couldn't match a 0 in agility. But it had advantages nobody was using. Stronger airframe, better guns, the ability to dive fast without falling apart. Duke drew diagrams until 3 in the morning. Then he wrote a note across the top of the page. Don't fight their fight. Make them fight ours. 6 months later, June 1942, Naval Air Station, North Island, San Diego, California. Duke stood in front of a bulletin board reading a notice. The Navy was looking for volunteer test pilots, experienced combat pilots willing to fly experimental aircraft, hazard pay, no guarantees, high washout rate. Duke pulled the notice off the board and walked to the administrative office. I'm volunteering. The clerk looked at him. You read the whole thing. This isn't patrol duty, this is testing equipment that might not work. I read it. Says here you've got 3 confirmed kills and a commendation. You could request instructor duty, safe assignment, good pay. Duke thought about Wake Island. About half the squadron lost in one morning. I'll take the test program. 2 days later, a Navy car picked him up and drove him to a nondescript building at the edge of the base. Inside, a man in his late 30s sat at a desk covered in blueprints, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, hands stained with ink and grease. He looked up when Duke entered. Dewey Whitlock. Yes, sir. People call me Duke. The man stood, extended his hand. Frank Kellerman. I'm the lead designer on a project I think you're going to find interesting. They shook. Kellerman's grip was firm. Working man's hands. Duke recognized the type. Someone who built things instead of just talking about them. Kellerman gestured to the blueprints. You ever wonder why we keep building fighters that can't beat a 0? Every day, sir. Stop calling me sir. I'm an engineer, not an officer. Kellerman pushed his glasses up. I lost my brother at Coral Sea. Lieutenant James Kellerman, SBD dive bomber pilot, went down with his gunner when a 0 got through the screen. Same problem as yours. Good pilot, good training, bad aircraft for the fight he was in. I decided I wasn't going to let that happen again. He unrolled a large blueprint. Duke stepped closer. The drawing showed an aircraft. Big, thick wings, massive engine cowling. This is the F-6F, Kellerman said. Navy calls it the Hellcat. I call it the plane that brings pilots home. And Duke studied the design. Looks heavy. It is heavy. Very heavy. 9,200 pounds empty. That's 2,000 pounds heavier than a Wildcat. Zeros will run circles around it. Will they? Kellerman pointed to the engine specifications. Pratt and Whitney R 2800, 2,000 horsepower, double row radial. This thing climbs 3,100 feet per minute, same as a 0. But here's the difference. He tapped another section of the blueprint. Armor, 212 pounds of it, behind the pilot, under the seat, around the fuel tanks. Those tanks are self-sealing. You take hits, the rubber contracts and plugs the holes. And these, he indicated the wing-mounted guns. 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, 1,500 rounds total. You hit something with this, it doesn't keep flying. Duke looked at the numbers again. His mind was already doing the math. If it climbs as fast as a 0, if it's armored, if it has heavier guns, when do I fly it? Kellerman smiled. Day after tomorrow, we've got a prototype at Bethpage. That's our factory on Long Island. You'll fly it there. Tell me if it's worth a damn. Bethpage, New York. June 24th, 1942. The Grumman factory sprawled across 200 acres. Assembly lines, testing facilities, dozens of aircraft in various stages of construction. Kellerman walked Duke through the main building, past workers riveting fuselage sections, past quality control inspectors checking tolerances. They stopped at the end of the line. There it sat, the F-6F Hellcat, prototype number 3. Fresh grey paint, propeller blades gleaming. It looked brutal. No elegant lines, no graceful curves, just functional, angular, aggressive. Duke walked around it slowly, ran his hand along the wing, thick, sturdy, built to take punishment. He peered into the cockpit. Armor plate behind the seat, heavy, serious. The instrument panel was clean, simple, everything a pilot needed and nothing extra. Looks like a tank with wings, Duke said. That's exactly what it is. Kellerman climbed up on the wing beside him. The brass fought me on the weight, said it would never work on a carrier. I told them dead pilots don't care about carrier compatibility. This plane is designed to keep you alive long enough to do your job. Duke climbed into the cockpit, settled into the seat, the armor plate pressed against his back, reassuring, solid. He gripped the control stick, ran through the pre-flight check. Everything felt different from the Wildcat, heavier, more powerful, like the machine was coiled, waiting. A mechanic pulled the chocks. Duke started the engine. The R2800 roared to life. Not the smooth purr of a smaller engine, a raw, guttural thunder that shook the airframe. Duke felt it in his chest, in his bones, 2,000 horses unleashed. He taxied to the runway, ran up the engine, checked magnetos, oil pressure, everything green. He released the brakes. The Hellcat surged forward. Not a gentle acceleration, a violent shove. Duke was pressed back into the seat as the machine clawed for airspeed. 60 knots, 80, 100. He pulled back on the stick. The Hellcat leapt off the ground. This was different. The Wildcat climbed with effort. The Hellcat climbed with authority. Duke pointed the nose up. 30 degrees, 40. The airspeed held. The engine didn't strain. It just kept pulling, kept climbing. Duke watched the altimeter wind up. 1,000 feet, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. He'd climbed 4,000 feet in 90 seconds. He leveled off at 6,000 feet and grinned. This thing, this brutal, heavy, powerful machine. He could fight in this. Duke put the Hellcat through its paces, hard turns. The controls felt stiff but responsive. Not nimble, not light, but precise, controllable. He dove, pushed it to 400 miles per hour. The airframe stayed solid, no flutter, no vibration, just clean speed. He pulled up hard, felt the G-force, felt the wings flex but hold. Then he tried something the Wildcat couldn't do. He climbed vertical, full throttle, straight up. The Hellcat kept climbing, didn't stall, didn't shudder, just muscled its way skyward on raw power. Duke keyed the radio. "Kellerman, you there? I'm here." "How's she handle?" "Like a freight train with guns. I can fight in this. I can win in this." There was a pause. Then Kellerman's voice came back, quieter. "That's what I needed to hear." Duke brought the Hellcat back around, lined up on the runway, dropped gear and flaps. The landing was heavier than he expected. The plane wanted to stay flying. He had to force it down, touched the wheels, rolled out, smooth. He taxied back to the hangar, shut down the engine, climbed out. Kellerman was waiting. So was a Navy commander Duke hadn't met before, Commander Harris, the same officer who'd chewed him out after Wake Island. Harris looked at the Hellcat, looked at Duke. "Well, it's heavy, sir. It's not going to dogfight, but it doesn't need to." "Explain." Duke chose his words carefully. "The Zero wins by turning. If we refuse to turn, if we use speed and altitude, if we hit and run, instead of staying engaged, this plane can do that. The armor means we can take hits and keep fighting. The guns mean when we do hit, we hit hard. Harris crossed his arms. You're describing boom and zoom tactics. We tried that with Wildcats. Didn't work. Because Wildcats don't have the power to climb back out after the dive. This does. This thing climbs as fast as a zero. We can stay above them, dive when we want, climb back up before they can react. They can't catch us in the vertical. Harris studied him for a long moment. You really believe that? Yes, sir, I do. Then you've got 6 months to prove it. Naval Air Station, Oceana, Virginia, July through December 1942. They gave Duke 14 pilots, all combat veterans, all survivors of early Pacific fighting, all skeptical that a heavier plane was the answer. The instructor was a man named Davis. Everyone called him Hammer. 47 years old, flew in the First World War, been shot down twice, survived both times. Now he taught instead of fought. Hammer stood in front of the ready room on the first day and said 11 words that changed everything. Forget dogfighting. You're hawks now, not sparrows. The training was brutal. 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. They didn't practice turning. They practiced diving, climbing, energy management, formation flying, gunnery at high speed, how to judge a deflection shot from 400 miles per hour, how to pull out of a dive without blacking out, how to climb vertical without stalling. Duke absorbed it all. He was the youngest pilot in the group, but he learned faster than anyone. Maybe because he'd been closer to death than most. Maybe because he understood what it felt like to fight an aircraft that was better than yours. He knew what it was like to lose. The days blurred together. Morning briefings at 0600, pre-flight checks, engine starts that shook the tarmac, takeoffs into the Virginia sky, climbing, diving, shooting, landing, debriefing, studying combat reports, eating mess hall food that tasted like cardboard, falling into bed exhausted, waking up to do it again. Duke learned to read the Hellcat's moods, the way the stick felt when you were approaching a stall, the sound the engine made when you pushed it too hard, the vibration that meant you were in clean air versus turbulent flow. He learned to trust the armor plate, to feel safe instead of vulnerable, to press attacks longer because he knew he could survive getting hit. The other pilots noticed. They started following Duke's lead, copying his techniques, asking questions. Duke didn't think of himself as a leader. He was just a kid from Kentucky who'd watched too many friends die. But Hammer saw something different. Hammer pulled him aside after the 3rd week. They stood on the flight line watching the other pilots run through drills. You're good, Whitlock. Better than good. You think like an engineer. You see the geometry of it. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Being good means I'm going to push you harder, and when this training is done, you're going to be one of the first into combat with this aircraft. That means you'll be proving the doctrine. You screw up, people die. You succeed, we change the war. No pressure. Duke looked at the Hellcat sitting on the tarmac. Grey paint, folded wings, waiting. When do we deploy? February, maybe March. You've got 6 months to get perfect. I suggest you use them. Duke did. Every hour he wasn't flying, he was studying. Combat reports from the Pacific, tactical analyses, Japanese pilot capabilities. He memorized 0 performance characteristics, knew their strengths, knew their weaknesses, understood how they thought. And he kept coming back to one principle. Don't fight their fight. Make them fight ours. The weather turned cold. November brought frost to the Virginia fields. December brought snow. The pilots kept flying. Training didn't stop for weather. Duke learned to start the R2800 in freezing temperatures, learned how ice affected the controls, learned to trust the Hellcat in conditions that would have grounded lesser aircraft. Christmas came. The Navy gave them 3 days off. Most pilots went home. Duke stayed. He had nowhere to go. Harlan County felt like another lifetime. His mother wrote letters, short, spelled poorly, but full of love. She was proud of him, scared for him, hopeful he'd come home. Duke wrote back, told her about the training, left out the dangerous parts, told her about the Hellcat, how it was different, how it might change things. He didn't mention Wake Island, didn't mention Charlie. Some things mothers didn't need to know. December came, the training class graduated. 12 of the 14 pilots passed. Duke ranked first. Hammer shook his hand and said something Duke would remember for the rest of his life. You asked the right question, Whitlock. Most pilots ask how they can fly better. You asked how to change the game. That's the difference between surviving and winning. The USS Essex, February 1943. Off the coast of Hawaii. Duke stood on the flight deck and watched deck crews secure 16 F-6F Hellcats. Brand new, fresh from the factory, his fighter was number 7. He'd already painted a name under the canopy. Old Harlan, for his hometown, for his father, for everything that got him here. The carrier was massive, 870 feet long, 34,000 tons, home to over 3,000 men. Duke had never seen anything like it. The hangar deck below was a maze of aircraft fuel lines, ammunition, and organized chaos. The ready rooms were cramped. The bunks were stacked 4 high. The mess hall fed hundreds at a time. Duke learned the carrier's rhythms, the calls over the loudspeaker, the sound of catapults launching aircraft, the controlled crash of arrested landings, the smell of aviation fuel and salt water, the constant motion. The ship never stopped moving. Neither did the war. The air group commander gathered the pilots in the ready room. Maps covered the walls, islands, shipping lanes, targets. The commander was direct. We deploy west in 1 week. Our job is to take pressure off forces in the Solomons. That means strikes against enemy positions, air superiority missions, fleet defense. You will encounter enemy fighters, most likely Zeros. Some of you have fought them before. Some haven't. Either way, listen up. He pointed to a diagram of the Hellcat. This aircraft is your advantage. Use it correctly and you win. Use it wrong and you die. Rules are simple. Never turn with a 0. Never slow down in a fight. Always maintain energy. Always have an escape route. You dive on them. You shoot. You climb out. You do not stay engaged. You do not get drawn into turning. You fight smart or you don't fight at all. Questions? Nobody spoke. Good. Wheels up in 7 days. Get your affairs in order. Duke went back to his bunk, pulled out the pencil and paper he'd used back at Wake Island. The diagrams were still there. The note across the top, still readable. Don't fight their fight. Make them fight ours. He'd asked the question. Now he was going to prove the answer. Marcus Island, March 4th, 1943. The briefing came at 0400. Duke sat in the ready room with 15 other pilots, all of them half awake, all of them drinking coffee that tasted like burnt oil. The air group commander stood at the front with a map of the Central Pacific. A small dot marked their target. Marcus Island, Japanese air base. Intelligence says they've got 20 to 30 fighters based there, maybe more. Our job is to suppress that airbase so the bombers can go in and flatten the runway. We launch at 0530, sunrise is 0615, we hit them while they're still waking up. He pointed to the flight assignments. Whitlock, you're leading the 2nd Division, 6 Hellcats. Your job is combat air patrol. You see enemy fighters, you engage, you keep them off the bombers. Simple, Duke nodded. Simple on paper, never simple in the air. The commander looked around the room. Some of you haven't seen combat yet, some of you have. Doesn't matter. What matters is you remember your training. Don't turn with them, don't slow down, hit, and climb out. We do this right. We all come home. Questions? Silence. Good. Man your aircraft. Duke walked out onto the flight deck. The sky was still dark, stars overhead. The carrier sliced through calm seas, leaving a phosphorescent wake. Deck crews swarmed around the Hellcats, pulling chocks, running final checks. Duke climbed into old Harlan's cockpit, the armor plate pressed against his back. Familiar now, comforting. He ran through the pre-flight. Trim tabs, fuel mixture, magnetos, everything checked out. The plane captain gave him a thumbs up. Duke started the engine. The R2800 caught on the 2nd try. That mechanical thunder. Other engines around the deck sparked to life. 16 Hellcats, all growling, all ready. The flight deck officer raised his flag, wound it in a circle. Duke pushed the throttle forward. The Hellcat rolled toward the bow, picked up speed. The deck officer dropped the flag. Duke pulled back on the stick. The Hellcat lifted off the carrier and climbed into the pre-dawn darkness. 15 more fighters followed him up. They formed up by divisions, climbed to 12,000 feet, headed west. The sun rose behind them, painting the clouds orange and pink. Beautiful, deceptive. In an hour, people would be trying to kill each other up here. Marcus Island appeared on the horizon 40 minutes later. Small, flat, a single runway cut across coral. Duke could see aircraft on the ground. Fighters, maybe bombers, hard to tell from this altitude. The bombers went in first. TBF Avengers, low and fast. Duke's division stayed high, watching, waiting. The Avengers dropped their ordnance. Explosions rippled across the airfield. Black smoke climbed into the sky. Then Duke saw them, dots rising from the smoke. Small at first, growing larger. Enemy fighters, climbing fast. He counted 11, maybe 12. Duke keyed his radio. Bogies climbing from the field, Angels 10 and ascending, 2nd Division on me, his wingmen acknowledged. Duke pushed the nose down slightly, gained speed, positioned himself above and behind the climbing enemy fighters. The geometry mattered. Altitude gives you energy, energy gives you options. He had both. The enemy fighters leveled off at 11,000 feet, still climbing but slower now, looking for the bombers. They hadn't seen the Hellcats yet. Duke had the sun behind him. The oldest advantage in aerial combat. He selected his target, the trailing fighter. Separated slightly from the others, he rolled, inverted, pulled through, dove. The Hellcat accelerated like gravity had doubled. 300 miles per hour, 350, 400. The enemy fighter grew larger in his gun sight. Still hadn't seen him. Still looking ahead. Duke closed to 400 yards, 300, 200. His thumb hovered over the trigger. He'd practiced this 1,000 times. High-speed gunnery. Lead the target. Account for closure rate. Account for bullet drop. Fire short bursts. Don't spray. 150 yards. Duke pressed the trigger. The 650 caliber guns hammered. The Hellcat shuddered with recoil. Tracer rounds laced out. He walked them into the target. Saw impacts on the left wing. The fuselage, the engine cowling. The enemy fighter's engine exploded. Not a small fire, a violent detonation, metal fragments spinning away. The entire cowling peeled back. Black smoke poured out. The fighter nosed over, fell away. No parachute, just a tumbling wreck trailing smoke and flame. Duke's first kill in a Hellcat. 2 seconds of firing, 1 enemy destroyed. That brought his total to 4 confirmed. He didn't watch it fall, couldn't afford to. 10 more enemy fighters up here and they'd just figured out where he was. Duke pulled up hard, full throttle. The Hellcat climbed, vertical, straight up. The altimeter wound through 12,000, 13,000, 14,000. The enemy fighters tried to follow, couldn't match the angle, couldn't match the power. Duke climbed away from them like they were standing still. At 15,000 feet he rolled over, looked down. The enemy formation had scattered. They were turning, searching, confused. American fighters weren't supposed to climb like this, weren't supposed to have this much power. The intelligence report said so. The combat experience said so. The intelligence was wrong. Duke's wingman called out another target, an enemy fighter diving toward the bombers. Duke rolled left, pulled through, dove again. Same tactic, speed and altitude, physics and geometry. He closed fast. The enemy pilot saw him this time, tried to turn. Too late. Duke fired. Another 2-second burst. Impacts across the wing route. The wing folded, separated. The enemy fighter spun into the ocean. 5th kill total. 2 in 4 minutes of combat. Duke climbed out again, checked his fuel. Still good, checked his ammunition. 1,400 rounds remaining out of 1,800. Checked the sky. The fight had spread out. Hellcats and enemy fighters tangled across 5,000 feet of altitude. But it wasn't the confused furball Duke had seen at Wake Island. This was different. Controlled. The Hellcats dove, fired, climbed out. The enemy fighters turned and twisted, but couldn't catch them. couldn't force them into slow-speed fights. The American pilots were following doctrine, fighting smart. An enemy fighter appeared above Duke, diving on him, role reversal. Duke saw him early, rolled right, pulled hard. The enemy pilot followed, tighter turn, trying to cut inside. Duke didn't try to match it, didn't need to. He pushed the nose down, dove away, gained speed. The enemy followed but couldn't keep up. The Hellcat pulled away in the dive. By the time the enemy pilot pulled out, Duke was a mile ahead and climbing again. That's when Duke felt the impacts, heard them. Sharp cracks, metallic bangs. Another enemy fighter had gotten behind him while he was focused forward. Rounds punched through the fuselage, through the wings. Duke felt the Hellcat shudder. The stick vibrated in his hand. He broke left, hard, looked back. Saw the enemy fighter overshooting. Too much speed. Couldn't turn with Duke at this airspeed. Duke reversed. Got on the enemy's 6. Fired. Missed. The enemy pulled vertical. Duke followed. They climbed together. The enemy fighter started to slow, started to wallow. Duke's Hellcat kept climbing, kept accelerating. The enemy stalled. Hung there for 1 second. Duke fired. Hit the engine. The enemy fighter fell away, spinning. 6 kill total. 3 in this fight. Duke leveled off. Checked his aircraft. The controls felt sloppy. He looked at the wings, counted holes, lost count at 10. Looked at the fuselage. More holes. The radio was damaged, static. He couldn't hear the other pilots, couldn't coordinate. He was alone up here with a shot-up aircraft and enemy fighters still in the area. Time to go home. Duke turned east, descended to 10,000 feet. The engine sounded rough. Missing on 1 cylinder, maybe 2, oil pressure fluctuating. He nursed the throttle, kept it smooth. The Hellcat vibrated but kept flying. Kellerman's words came back to him. Every pilot comes home. It was doing that, barely. But it was doing it. The USS Essex appeared on the horizon 20 minutes later. Duke had never been so happy to see a carrier. He dropped gear. The hydraulics groaned, but worked. Dropped flaps. The Hellcat wallowed, heavy, damaged. He came in high. Corrected. Descended. The landing signal officer waved him in. Duke crossed the deck, cut power, caught the 3-wire, stopped hard, safe. He sat in the cockpit for a moment, just breathing. The engine ticked as it cooled. Deck crew ran toward him. The crew chief climbed up on the wing, looked at the damage, looked at Duke. Jesus Christ, Lieutenant, how many times they hit you? Duke climbed out, counted the holes he could see. 17 in the wings, at least a dozen more in the fuselage. Some had gone clean through, some were lodged in the armor plate behind the seat. That armor had stopped rounds that would have killed him. 17 I can count, maybe 30 total. The crew chief shook his head. Sir, you shouldn't be walking right now. Duke looked at old Harlan, shot to hell. Still flyable, still got him back. Kellerman knew what he was doing. The air group commander called Duke into his office that evening. Duke expected a debrief, got something else. The commander had a radio intercept transcript on his desk, Japanese. Translated by intelligence, he slid it across to Duke. Read it. Duke picked up the paper. The intercept was from Marcus Island, from the surviving Japanese pilots reporting back to their headquarters. The translation was rough but clear enough. American fighters new type, heavy but powerful. Climbs aggressively, does not engage in turning combat, uses vertical tactics, recommend avoid prolonged engagement. Duke set the paper down. The commander leaned back in his chair. You know what this means? They're adapting. They're scared. For 2 years their pilots have owned the sky. Now they're telling each other to avoid fighting us. That's a psychological shift. That's the beginning of the end for them. Duke thought about the 3 fighters he'd shot down, thought about the 17 holes in his aircraft. Didn't feel like the beginning of the end, felt like the beginning of a very long fight. How many did we lose? 1. Engine failure on approach. Pilot bailed out, destroyer picked him up, otherwise we came back intact. You got 3 confirmed kills, 2 other pilots got 2 each. Total 11 enemy destroyed for 1 Hellcat damaged beyond repair. Those are numbers we can work with. The commander stood, extended his hand. "Good work, Whitlock. You proved the doctrine. Now we do it again." They shook. Duke left the office, walked through the ship, down to the hangar deck where mechanics were swarming over Old Harlan, patching holes, replacing damaged sections. It would fly again? So would he. The kills came faster after Marcus Island. April brought Munda Airfield. Duke got 2 more, both clean kills, dive, shoot, climb, no damage to his aircraft. Squadron total 16 enemy destroyed. His personal tally now stood at 8. May, Bougainville. Duke got 3, high altitude intercept. Enemy bombers with fighter escort. The bombers were easy, slow. The fighters tried to protect them, couldn't. Duke and his wingman shredded 2 bombers and a fighter in one pass, climbed away before the other escorts could react. 11 total kills now, the pattern repeated. Every mission, the same doctrine. Never turn, never slow down, hit hard, and get out. The Hellcat made it possible. The training made it reliable. The enemy made it necessary. By June, Duke's kill count stood at 13. He was an ace twice over. The Navy loved aces, good for morale, good for recruiting. They took his photo, ran it in newspapers back home. Kentucky coal miner's son becomes ace fighter pilot. His mother sent him a clipping. She'd saved it, put it in a frame. Life on the carrier settled into routine. Wake at 05:30, coffee, brief, fly, debrief, eat, sleep, repeat. The days blurred together. Islands became targets. Targets became statistics. Statistics became letters home saying mission accomplished. Duke made friends, lost friends, watched new pilots arrive fresh from training, watched them learn, watched some of them die. The turnover was constant. The war was constant. The only thing that changed was the direction they were sailing. Always west, always closer to Japan. August brought a different kind of mission, fleet defense. The Essex battle group was pushing west, closer to Japanese-held islands, closer to their air bases. Intelligence said to expect heavy attacks. They were right. Duke was on combat air patrol when the radar operators called out a large formation inbound. 50-plus contacts, high altitude. Duke's division climbed to intercept. They met the enemy formation at 19,000 feet. 30 enemy bombers, 20 fighters escorting. Duke had 6 Hellcats. The numbers were bad. The geometry was worse. The enemy had altitude advantage, had numbers, but Duke had speed and he had a plan. 2nd Division echelon right. We take the fighters first. Single pass. Don't get separated. His wingmen acknowledged. Duke rolled inverted, pulled through, dove on the enemy fighter formation from above and behind. 45-degree angle, speed building, 420 miles per hour. The enemy fighters scattered. Some turned, some dove. Duke ignored them, focused on one target. Leading fighter, fired. 3-second burst. The fighter disintegrated, pieces flying everywhere. 14th kill. Duke pulled up, climbed vertical, rolled, looked down. His wingman had gotten 2 more. 3 enemy fighters down in one pass. The rest were confused, turning, looking for threats, wasting energy. Duke dove again, different angle, got another fighter from the side, didn't stick around to watch it fall, climbed out. The enemy bombers were pressing on, ignoring the fighters, going for the carriers. Duke couldn't let that happen. He positioned above the bomber formation, dove straight down through them, picked the leader, fired all 6 guns. The bomber's left engine exploded. It nosed over, took 2 other bombers with it in the fall. Collision. Duke pulled out below the formation, climbed hard, got above them again. His ammunition was running low, maybe 300 rounds left. He made them count. 1 more pass, 1 more bomber burning. 17 kills total, 4 in this mission. Duke climbed away, watched his wingmen continue the attack, watched other Hellcat divisions arrive. The enemy formation broke apart. Some bombers turned back, some pressed on. The ones that pressed on got destroyed by anti-aircraft fire from the ships. None of them hit the carriers. Duke counted the victories on the way back to the Essex. His division had gotten 9 enemy aircraft. The entire air group had gotten 37. The Navy lost 3 Hellcats. 2 pilots recovered, 1 missing. Duke landed with nearly empty guns and a full tank. He'd been in the air for 2 hours and 18 minutes, felt like 10 minutes. Time compressed in combat. Everything happened fast and slow simultaneously. The crew chief met him on the deck. "How many, sir?" "2 fighters, 2 bombers." "That makes 17 total, Lieutenant Commander." September brought a promotion, Lieutenant to Lieutenant Commander. They gave him his own squadron, VF-17, 18 Hellcats, 32 pilots. Duke was 25 years old and commanding a fighter squadron. The Navy didn't care about age, they cared about results. His first briefing with the squadron was short. He stood in the ready room and told them the same thing Hammer Davis had told him. "Forget dogfighting. We're hawks. We dive, we kill. We climb out. We don't turn. We don't slow down. We don't take stupid risks. You follow that you live. You ignore that you die." Questions. Nobody asked questions. They'd seen the combat reports. They knew Duke's record. They knew the doctrine worked. Duke learned what it meant to command. It wasn't just flying. It was paperwork, personnel issues, maintenance schedules, training new pilots, writing letters to families when men didn't come back. The weight of it surprised him. Every decision affected 32 lives. Every mission order could mean someone died. He took it seriously, studied each pilot, learned their strengths, covered their weaknesses, paired them carefully, aggressive pilots with cautious ones, veterans with rookies. He flew with different divisions each mission, rotated through, made sure everyone knew his standards, his expectations, his tactics. The squadron respected him, not because of his rank, because he led from the front, because he didn't ask them to do anything he wouldn't do, because when things went wrong, he took the blame. When things went right, he gave them credit. Through October and November, the squadron flew cover for operations in the Gilbert Islands. Heavy fighting, Duke got 4 more kills, bringing his total to 21. The squadron got 41, lost 2 pilots, both to anti-aircraft fire, none to enemy fighters. The doctrine was working. Duke wrote letters home, short, careful. His mother couldn't know the details. He told her he was safe, told her he was careful, told her the Navy was taking good care of him. All lies, but necessary ones. Mothers didn't need to know their sons flew into gunfire every other day. December marked 1 year since he'd started training in the Hellcat. The aircraft was now standard equipment on every American carrier. The tactics were doctrine across the fleet. The kill ratios had shifted dramatically. Americans were winning the air war. The price was visible in the enemy. Captured intelligence reports showed Japanese training pipelines were collapsing, fuel shortages, pilot losses, new pilots entering combat with a fraction of the training hours American pilots had. The gap was widening every month. Duke read those reports with mixed feelings. Part of him felt satisfaction. The doctrine was working. Part of him felt something else. Those were men dying, skilled men, brave men. The enemy, but still men. War made you think about things like that, late at night, when you couldn't sleep. When the carrier rocked in the waves and you wondered if tomorrow was the day your luck ran out. January 1944. Duke's kill count stood at 21. The Navy wanted to rotate him stateside. Instructor duty, pass on what he'd learned. Duke requested to stay with the squadron. Request denied. He'd done enough combat. Time to train the next generation. Then February happened. Intelligence briefed a major operation, the biggest carrier strike in the Pacific War. Target? The Mariana Islands. The Japanese fleet was expected to respond with everything they had, every carrier, every pilot. The decisive battle everyone had been expecting. Duke's rotation was postponed. The Navy wanted experienced squadron leaders for this one, wanted proven combat pilots, wanted people who wouldn't break when things got bad. Duke fit all 3 categories. The briefing came in late May. Every squadron commander on the Essex gathered in the flag briefing room. The admiral stood at the front. Maps covered the walls. The Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam. Red markings showed Japanese positions. Blue markings showed American invasion forces. The admiral got straight to it. Operation Forager. We invade Saipan on June 15th. The Japanese will contest this. They have to. Saipan puts our B-29s in range of Tokyo. They lose Saipan, they lose the war. Expect them to throw everything at us. He pointed to intelligence estimates. Combined Japanese fleet, 9 carriers, 450 aircraft, maybe more. Every experienced pilot they have left, every elite squadron. This is their last chance to turn the war around. Our job is to make sure they fail. The room was silent. 450 enemy aircraft. That was more than most commanders had seen in their entire careers. The admiral continued. We will have numerical superiority. 15 carriers, 900 aircraft, better planes, better pilots, better tactics. But numbers aren't everything. The Japanese pilots know this is their final stand. They'll be desperate, aggressive, expect kamikaze tactics, expect them to ignore losses and press attacks. Your job is to stop them before they reach the carriers. He looked around the room, made eye contact with each squadron commander. Some of you won't come back from this, that's the reality. But if we win this battle, we win the war. The Japanese carrier force will be finished. They won't recover. This is the decisive engagement. Make it count. The briefing ended. Duke walked out onto the flight deck. The sun was setting. The entire carrier group was visible. 15 carriers, dozens of destroyers and cruisers, hundreds of aircraft, the largest naval force ever assembled. And in 2 weeks it would all converge on a handful of islands in the middle of the Pacific. Duke thought about the first time he'd flown a Hellcat, about Kellerman's promise, the plane that brings pilots home. He'd trusted that for 18 months, trusted it through 21 kills, through dozens of missions, through hundreds of hours of combat. The Hellcat had never let him down. He walked to Old Harlan. The ground crew had just finished maintenance. Fresh paint, all systems green, ready to fly. Duke climbed up on the wing, sat in the cockpit, ran his hand over the control stick. The armor plate behind the seat had saved his life 4 times, stopped rounds that would have killed him. He owed this machine everything. A mechanic walked over, young kid, maybe 20. You okay, Commander? Duke looked at him. Yeah, just thinking. About the big fight? Yeah, the kid nodded. We're gonna win, right? Duke thought about Wake Island, about half the squadron lost in one morning, about learning to fight in a plane that couldn't beat a 0, about finding a plane that could, about proving the doctrine, about watching the kill ratios shift, about seeing enemy intelligence reports that said, avoid American fighters. Yeah, Duke said, we're gonna win. The kid smiled, walked away. Duke sat in the cockpit a while longer, watched the sun disappear below the horizon, thought about what was coming. 450 enemy aircraft, the best pilots Japan had left. Their last stand, their final chance. Duke had asked a question 2 years ago. What if we changed the game? The Hellcat had been the answer, the tactics had proven it. The results had validated it. Now came the final exam, the biggest test, the decisive battle. June 19th, 1944, Philippine Sea, 900 aircraft. 1 day to decide the war. Duke was ready, June 19th, 1944, 0500 hours, USS Essex, Philippine Sea. Duke woke before the alarm. Couldn't sleep anyway. Too much adrenaline, too much anticipation. He'd been in combat for 18 months, but this felt different, bigger, final. The ready room briefing was at 0530. He had 30 minutes. He used them to write a letter. Dear Mama, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. Don't be sad. I did what I came here to do. I asked a question, found an answer, proved it worked. The boys who come after me will have a better chance because of it. That's enough. I love you, Duke. He sealed the envelope, left it in his locker, hoped he'd tear it up tomorrow. The ready room was packed, 50 pilots. Every squadron commander, the air group commander, stood at the front with updated intelligence. The map showed the Japanese fleet position, closer than expected. Listen up. Enemy carriers launched their first strike at 0430. Radar picked them up 70 miles out. Inbound now. We count 69 aircraft in the first wave. Bombers and fighters mixed. More waves expected. Our job is simple. Kill them before they get to the fleet. He pointed to Duke. VF-17, you're leading the intercept. 16 Hellcats. You launch in 20 minutes, climb to 25,000 feet, Vector 270. You'll meet them head-on. Duke nodded. No questions. He'd done this before, just never on this scale. Other squadrons will cycle through behind you. We're putting everything up. 220 fighters. This is every Hellcat we've got. Make them count. The pilots filed out. Duke walked to Old Harlan. The ground crew had her ready, fueled, armed. 1,800 rounds across 6 guns, enough to kill a lot of people if he aimed right. He climbed into the cockpit, the armor plate pressed against his back. Familiar. Reassuring. He'd been hit 4 times in this plane. 4 times the armor-stopped rounds meant for him. Maybe today it would be 5. The engine started on the first try. Around the deck, 15 more Hellcats roared to life. Duke taxied into position. The flight deck officer raised his flag. Duke pushed the throttle forward. The Hellcats surged ahead, lifted off, climbed into the pre-dawn darkness. 15 fighters formed up on him. Duke's radio crackled. All flights, this is Dixie Control. Bogies bearing 270, range 65 miles, Angels 19. Vector to intercept. Duke acknowledged, turned west, climbed hard. The Hellcat climbed at 3,000 feet per minute. At that rate, they'd hit 25,000 feet in 8 minutes. Math and physics always came back to that. The sun broke the horizon behind them. Orange light painted the clouds. Beautiful morning to die. Duke pushed the thought away, focused on the mission. 16 fighters, 69 enemy aircraft. Bad odds on paper, but they had altitude, had speed, had training, had the right aircraft. Odds didn't tell the whole story. At 24,000 feet, Duke leveled off, scanned the sky ahead. Nothing yet. The radar controller's voice crackled. Bogies 30 miles closing fast. Angels 19, multiple groups. Duke's eyes strained, looked for dots against the blue. There, low, maybe 15 miles out, growing larger, he counted, stopped at 20, more behind them, many more. Tally-ho, contact Angels 19. Many bogies, his wingmen acknowledged. Duke checked his formation, everyone in position, echelon right, perfect spacing, just like training. He armed his guns, flipped the safety off, felt the trigger under his thumb. The enemy formation climbed toward them, slow, struggling. They were at their ceiling, engines straining. The Hellcats had 6,000 feet of altitude advantage. Duke let them close, 1 mile, half a mile, quarter mile. Second division on me, we take them from above. Duke rolled inverted, pulled through, dove. The Hellcat accelerated like a stone. 350 miles per hour, 400, 420. The enemy fighters grew huge in his windscreen. He picked a target. Leading bomber, fat, slow, picked the nose up slightly, led the shot, pressed the trigger. The 650s hammered. The plane shook. Tracers laced out. Impacts walked across the bomber's left wing. The engine, the fuselage, the wing folded, separated. The bomber rolled inverted. Fell away burning. 20-second kill. Duke pulled up hard. 6 Gs. Vision graying at the edges. Climbed vertical. The altimeter wound up. 20,000. 22, 24. He leveled off. Looked down. The enemy formation had scattered. Some turning, some diving, some continuing straight ahead like nothing had happened. Confusion. That was good. His wingman called out another target. Duke rolled. Dove again. This was the doctrine. This was boom and zoom. Hit from above. Kill fast. Climb out before they could react. Don't get slow. Don't get drawn in. Stay above. Stay fast. He caught another bomber in a climbing turn. It was trying to gain altitude, trying to reach the carriers. Duke cut it off. Fired from 400 yards. Too far for precision, but close enough for volume. 1,500 rounds per minute across 6 guns. 9,000 rounds per minute total. The math was overwhelming. Some of those rounds hit. Enough of them hit. The bomber's right engine exploded. Black smoke poured out. The pilot tried to hold it level. Couldn't. The aircraft nosed over. Spiraled down, trailing fire. 23rd kill. Duke climbed again. His radio was chaos. Pilots calling out targets, calling for help, calling kills. The fight had spread across 20 miles of sky. Hellcats everywhere, enemy aircraft burning, falling, exploding. Duke had never seen anything like it. A fighter appeared in front of him, head-on, closing fast. Enemy pilot, desperate or stupid, probably desperate. Duke didn't flinch, held his course. They were playing chicken at 400 miles per hour. Combined closure rate, 800 miles per hour, 13 miles per minute. In 10 seconds, they'd collide. Duke fired first. Short burst. The enemy fired back. Tracers crossed in the space between them. Duke felt impacts, heard them, metallic bangs. The windscreen cracked. He didn't break. Neither did the enemy. 5 seconds. 4, 3. The enemy fighter exploded. Direct hit on the fuel tank. The fireball expanded. Duke flew through it, felt the heat, felt the debris hit the aircraft. Came out the other side, still flying. The enemy didn't. 24th kill. Duke's hands were shaking now. Adrenaline. He forced them steady. Checked his 6. Clear. Checked his altitude. 23,000. Checked his fuel. Half tank. Plenty. Checked his ammunition. 1,000 rounds remaining. Still dangerous. Below him, the slaughter continued. Hellcats diving, shooting, climbing, enemy aircraft spinning, burning, breaking apart. He'd been in combat for 18 months and never seen destruction on this scale. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. His squadron exec called over the radio. "Commander, we've got a problem. Enemy fighters pushing through the screen, headed for the carriers. Need help." Duke looked down, saw them, maybe 10 enemy aircraft, low, fast, determined. They'd gotten through the chaos, made it past the Hellcats. Now they were making their run. Duke rolled. Dove called his wingman. "Stay with me, we're going low." The dive was steep. Duke pushed it to 450 miles per hour. The Hellcat's airframe groaned. He didn't care. Those enemy fighters couldn't reach the carriers, couldn't be allowed. He closed the distance, got behind the trailing fighter, fired, hit the tail, the rudder. The fighter wobbled but kept flying. Duke fired again, longer burst, walked the rounds up the fuselage. The canopy shattered. The aircraft nosed over. Hit the ocean at 300 miles per hour. Disintegrated on impact. 25th kill. Duke pulled up. His altitude was gone. He was at 2,000 feet. Vulnerable, exposed. He saw an enemy fighter turning toward him. Aggressive, experienced. The aircraft's paint was faded. Battle damage visible. This wasn't a rookie. This was someone who'd been fighting for years. Someone good. They merged, head on. Both turning, both looking for advantage. Duke pulled hard right. The enemy pulled harder, cut inside, got on Duke's tail. Rounds cracked past the canopy. Duke reversed, rolled left, dove. The enemy followed, matched every move, stayed glued to his 6. This was different. This was a real fight. Duke couldn't shake him, couldn't outturn him. The enemy pilot knew every trick Duke did, maybe more. They'd been doing this since China, since before the war. This was skill against skill. Duke climbed, vertical, full throttle. The R-2800 screamed. 2,000 horsepower pulling him straight up. The enemy followed. His aircraft was lighter. Should climb better. Didn't. The Hellcats' raw power compensated for the weight. They climbed together. 12,000 feet, 15,000, 18,000. The enemy fighter started to slow, started to wallow. Duke's Hellcat kept pulling, kept climbing. The enemy pilot tried to hang on, tried to match the angle. His aircraft stalled, hung there for less than a second, nose high, airspeed 0. Perfect target. Duke rolled, got the nose down, fired. The enemy fighter was helpless, couldn't maneuver, couldn't evade. Duke's rounds hit the engine, the wing root, the fuel tank. The fighter caught fire. The pilot fought it for 3 seconds. Then the canopy blew, the pilot ejected, parachute deployed. Duke circled, watched the parachute descend. The pilot hung in the harness, defenseless. Standard procedure was to continue attacking. Enemy pilot in the water could be rescued. Could fight again. Kill him now, end it. Duke lined up the shot, put the gun sight on the parachute. His thumb rested on the trigger. 1 second of firing would do it. Easy, justified, done all the time. He didn't fire, couldn't. This pilot had fought well, fought honorably, deserved better than being shot while defenseless. Duke pulled up, waggled his wings, a gesture of respect. The enemy pilot probably couldn't see it, probably didn't care. Duke did it anyway. He keyed his radio. Splash 1. Pilot bailed out, returning to station. His wingman came back. You let him go? Yeah. Silence. Then, understood, sir. Duke climbed back to altitude. The fight was ending. Most of the enemy aircraft were gone, destroyed, scattered, retreating. Hellcats dominated the sky. Duke counted contrails, counted parachutes, counted oil slicks on the water below. The numbers were staggering. The radar controller's voice cut through. All flights, bogies inbound. Second wave. 70 miles, many contacts. And it started again. The second wave was larger. 82 enemy aircraft. The Hellcats intercepted them 60 miles from the fleet. Same tactics, same results. Duke got one more kill, a bomber trying to hide in clouds. He found it, shot it down. 27th total. His ammunition was running low. 200 rounds left. His fuel was at quarter tank. Time to head home, he called his squadron. 2nd Division RTB, we're Winchester and low on fuel. They acknowledged. Duke turned east. 6 Hellcats followed him. They'd been airborne for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Felt like 20 minutes. Time compressed in combat. Stretched and shrunk simultaneously. The USS Essex appeared ahead. Duke called the tower, got clearance to land, dropped gear, dropped flaps. The Hellcat felt heavy, sluggish, battle damage. He hadn't noticed it during the fight. Noticed it now. The controls were stiff. The engine was running rough, oil pressure low. He came in high, corrected, descended. The landing signal officer waved him in. Duke crossed the deck, cut power, felt the tailhook grab. The Hellcat jerked to a stop. Safe. Duke sat in the cockpit. Didn't move. Couldn't. The adrenaline was draining out of him, leaving exhaustion. His hands shook. His legs trembled. He tried to stand, nearly fell. A deckhand grabbed his arm, helped him out. You okay, Commander? Duke nodded, couldn't speak. His crew chief ran over, looked at old Harlan, stopped, stared. Jesus Christ, sir, how did you fly this back? Duke turned, looked at his aircraft for the first time since landing, counted holes, stopped at 50. There were more, many more. The left wing had 3 holes big enough to put a fist through. The tail was shredded. The fuselage looked like Swiss cheese. Hydraulic fluid leaked from a dozen punctures. Oil dripped from the engine. The crew chief walked around the aircraft, counting, marking damage. He came back with a clipboard. 89 hits, 89 separate impacts. The armor stopped at least 20 rounds. The self-sealing tanks stopped fuel fires. The airframe held together when it shouldn't have. Sir, this is a miracle. Duke thought about Kellerman, about the promise. Kellerman's design held true. 89 hits, still flew, still landed, still got him back. He knew what he was building. He walked to the island, climbed to the ready room. Other pilots were returning, landing. The air group commander was tallying results. Numbers on a chalkboard, enemy aircraft destroyed, American losses, the ratio was obscene. First wave, 47 enemy destroyed, 0 American losses. Second wave, 61 enemy destroyed, 3 American losses. Third wave intercepted by different squadrons, 73 enemy destroyed, 4 American losses. Fourth wave turned back before reaching the fleet, enemy losses unknown. No American contact. Total for the day, over 500 enemy aircraft destroyed or damaged. 29 American aircraft lost, most to anti-aircraft fire, only 6 to enemy fighters. Duke did the math. 17-to-1 kill ratio. The Japanese had sent 750 aircraft against the American fleet. Less than 200 made it home. The rest were in the ocean, burning, sinking, gone. The air group commander saw Duke, walked over, extended his hand. 6 kills today. Yes, sir. That brings your total to 27, the commander whistled. You just became one of the top aces in the Pacific. Navy's going to love this. Duke didn't feel like an ace. Felt like a man who'd survived another day through luck and engineering. He found a chair, sat down. Someone handed him water. He drank it. Tasted like metal. like blood. He drank it anyway. The squadron exec sat next to him. "You okay?" 89 hits. "Yeah, we counted. How'd you make it back?" Duke thought about the question. About the armor. The self-sealing tanks. The powerful engine that kept running despite damage. The sturdy airframe that held together when it shouldn't have. About Kellerman's design. About the doctrine that kept him fast and high and alive. Right aircraft, right tactics, right amount of luck. The exec nodded. The enemy pilot you didn't shoot. The one in the parachute, words spreading. Some guys think you made a mistake. Think you should have killed him. Duke looked at him. You think that? No, sir, I think you showed class. Showed respect. That matters. Duke hoped it mattered. Hoped the enemy pilot survived. Hoped he went home to his family. Hoped he never flew again. War made you hope for strange things. The battle continued for 3 more days. Smaller strikes, fewer enemy aircraft. The Japanese fleet withdrew. Their carriers were intact but empty. No aircraft, no pilots. No ability to continue fighting. American submarines found them 2 days later. Sank 3 carriers, the rest retreated to Japan. They wouldn't sortie again for the rest of the war. The final tally came in on June 22nd. 750 Japanese aircraft had participated in the battle. 550 were destroyed. 200 returned. Of those 200, most were damaged beyond repair. Effective Japanese carrier aviation was finished. They'd bet everything on this battle. Lost everything. American losses. 29 aircraft in combat, 43 more to operational accidents and deck crashes. 72 total against 550 enemy destroyed. The kill ratio was astronomical. The strategic impact was decisive. The Pacific War had just turned a corner. Duke was in the wardroom when the final numbers were posted. Other pilots gathered around, reading, processing. Some cheered, some stayed quiet. Duke stayed quiet. He was thinking about Wake Island, about half the squadron lost in one morning, about flying a wildcat against Zeros, about feeling helpless, about watching friends die because they had the wrong aircraft and the wrong tactics. This was different. This was overwhelming victory. This was what happened when you asked the right question and found the right answer, when you changed the game instead of playing it on the enemy's terms. Commander Harris found Duke that evening. The same officer who'd chewed him out after Wake Island, who'd told him breaking formation got pilots killed. They hadn't spoken much since. Harris walked over, extended his hand. "I owe you an apology, Whitlock." Duke stood, shook his hand. "For what, sir?" "Wake Island, I told you to follow procedure, told you doctrine would keep you alive. I was wrong. You asked better questions than I did, found better answers, changed the war because of it. The engineers changed the war, sir." "I just proved their work," Harris smiled. "The engineers built the tool. You figured out how to use it. That's the difference between having an advantage and exploiting it. The Navy's recommending you for the Navy Cross. You've earned it." They talked for a few more minutes. Then Harris left. Duke went to his bunk, found the letter he'd written that morning, the one he'd planned to leave in his locker if he didn't make it back. He tore it up, wouldn't need it now. The USS Essex returned to Pearl Harbor in July. Duke's squadron was rotated stateside, instructor duty. The Navy wanted them training the next generation, passing on the doctrine, the tactics, the lessons learned. Duke spent 3 months at Nassau Oceana, the same field where he'd trained with Hammer Davis 2 years earlier. Now he was the instructor, teaching new pilots the same lessons. Don't turn, don't slow down, use altitude, use speed, fight smart. The war continued without him. Other pilots flew Hellcats, used the tactics, racked up kills. The doctrine had spread across the entire Pacific Fleet. The results were consistent. American fighters dominated, Japanese losses mounted, the gap widened every month. Duke requested return to combat in October, request denied. He'd done enough, time to let others carry the load. He didn't argue, understood the reasoning, still wanted to be out there, wanted to finish what he'd started. The war ended in August 1945. Duke was still at Oceana, training pilots who'd never see combat. The atomic bombs fell. Japan surrendered. It was over. Duke returned to Kentucky in October, Harlan County, the coal mines, the railroad yard where he'd worked as a grinder. Everything looked smaller than he remembered. The mountains were the same, the sky was the same. But everything else had shrunk. His mother met him at the train station. She'd aged. Grey hair. More lines around her eyes. She hugged him, held on for a long time, didn't say anything, didn't need to. He was home. He was alive. That was enough. The Navy discharged him in November. Honorable discharge, full benefits. They offered him a regular commission career path. Duke declined. He'd had enough of war, enough of killing, enough of watching friends die. He wanted normal, wanted quiet, wanted to forget. He couldn't forget. The memories stayed. The faces, the dogfights, the sound of the R-2800 engine, the feel of the Hellcat's controls, the sight of enemy aircraft burning. Some memories you carry forever. Duke married in 1946, Sarah Henderson, Army nurse. She'd treated burn victims from Pearl Harbor, understood what war did to men without Duke having to explain. She was kind, patient, understood when he woke up at night from dreams about falling aircraft, about fires, about counting holes in wings. She didn't ask questions, just held him until he went back to sleep. They had 2 daughters, Margaret after Duke's mother, Elizabeth after Sarah's. Duke got a job at a factory. Quality control, good pay, steady work, normal. He flew occasionally, civilian aircraft, small planes, nothing like the Hellcat, nothing that climbed vertical or dove at 400 miles per hour. Just quiet flying, peaceful. The years settled into routine. Duke and Sarah bought a small house on the edge of Harlan. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a garage where Duke could work with his hands. He built furniture, fixed neighbors' cars, taught his daughters to use tools. Margaret was shy. Elizabeth was bold. Duke loved them both equally, fiercely. He'd seen enough death to know life was precious. The Navy called him in 1953, asked if he'd consult on a project, new fighter design. They wanted input from combat veterans. Duke agreed. Spent 2 weeks at the Naval Air Development Center, met with engineers, test pilots, reviewed designs, gave recommendations. The lead engineer reminded him of Kellerman. Same intensity, same focus. Duke asked about him, found out Kellerman had died in 1949, heart attack, 53 years old, died at his desk, still working, still designing. The Navy gave Duke Kellerman's final project notes. Duke kept them, read them sometimes, remembered the man who'd promised to build a plane that brought pilots home, the man who kept that promise 89 times in one day. The years passed. Duke grew older, grey hair, slower movements. But the memories stayed sharp. He attended reunions, met with other Hellcat pilots. They told stories, compared notes, remembered friends who didn't make it back. The numbers shrank every year. Fewer pilots, fewer survivors. Time claimed everyone eventually. The F-6F Hellcat was officially retired from active service in 1954. The Navy threw a ceremony. Duke attended, watched the last operational Hellcat land for the final time, felt something like grief. This aircraft had saved his life, had saved thousands of lives, had changed the war. Now it was obsolete, replaced, forgotten by everyone except those who'd flown it. The final statistics were published in a Navy history book. Duke read them in his living room. The numbers were staggering. F-6F Hellcat. Production total 12,275 aircraft. Combat service 1943 to 1954. Enemy aircraft destroyed 5,223 confirmed kills. Kill ratio 19-1. Highest scoring naval fighter in history. Duke thought about those numbers. 5,223 enemy pilots. Gone. Dead. Because of the aircraft Kellerman designed, because of the tactics Duke and others proved, 5,000 families that lost sons, fathers, brothers. The enemy wasn't faceless, wasn't numbers. They were people. Skilled people, brave people, dead people. War made you think about things like that when you got older, made you wonder if it was worth it, made you count costs differently. Duke decided it was worth it, had to be. The alternative was worse, but that didn't make the cost any lighter. His daughters grew up, got married, had children. Duke became a grandfather, taught his grandchildren about airplanes, took them to air shows, showed them photos of old Harlan, told them stories, edited them, left out the parts about blood and fire and men dying, kept the parts about bravery and duty and asking the right questions. The coal mines where his father died closed in 1968. Economic changes, cheaper coal elsewhere. The railroad yard shut down in 1973. The town shrank. People left, looking for work, looking for futures. Duke stayed. This was home, the mountains, the sky, the place where he'd learned to ask questions. Sarah died in 1998. Cancer. Quick, but not painless. Duke held her hand at the end, told her he loved her, thanked her for 52 years. She smiled, squeezed his hand, said she'd wait for him. Then she was gone. Duke lived 3 more years alone. His daughters visited, his grandchildren called, but the house felt empty. He filled his days with small tasks, read books, watched the news, built model airplanes, Hellcats mostly. He'd start them, never finish them. Couldn't quite get the details right. Couldn't remember exactly how the instrument panel looked, how the armor plate felt. The memories were fading. Finally. He died in 2001, 83 years old, heart failure, quick, painless. He was in his workshop when it happened, building a model of a Hellcat. Never finished it. His daughters found him there. Peaceful, still holding the model, still remembering. The funeral was small. Family, a few surviving pilots. The Navy sent a representative, full honors, flag, rifle salute, taps, and something special. 6 Warbird Hellcats, restored, maintained by collectors. They flew over the cemetery in formation, missing man formation. One aircraft pulled up, climbed vertical, disappeared into the clouds. The sound of those R-2800 engines echoed off the mountains, deep, powerful, unforgettable. The sound Duke had lived with for 2 years of war. The sound that meant survival, victory, home. His headstone was simple. Name, dates, branch of service, and one line his daughters added, words he'd said once during an interview, words they'd never forgotten. He asked the question that mattered. The Hellcat's legacy lived on. Museums preserved them. Collectors flew them. Historians studied them. The aircraft represented a turning point, a moment when American engineering and American tactics aligned to create overwhelming advantage, when asking the right question changed everything. The principles Duke and others proved remained relevant. Modern fighter doctrine still emphasized energy management, vertical tactics, boom and zoom, different aircraft, different wars, same mathematics, same physics. Altitude gives you energy, energy gives you options, options equal survival. The Navy incorporated those lessons into every fighter pilot's training. F-14s, F-18s, F-35s, different capabilities, same foundational concepts. The Hellcat had taught the Navy how to think about air combat. That knowledge never became obsolete. In 2015, the Smithsonian restored a Hellcat to flying condition. They painted it in Duke's colors, Old Harlan. Number 7. They flew it at air shows, demonstrated what the aircraft could do, climbed vertical, dove steep, showed the power, the capability, the lethality. Crowds watched, took photos. Most didn't understand what they were seeing. A few did. The veterans. The historians. The people who understood what this aircraft meant. Wake Island, December 11th, 1941. 6 American fighters climb into the morning sun. Half don't come back. The survivors learn a brutal lesson. They're flying the wrong aircraft, fighting the wrong fight, dying for the wrong reasons. Philippine Sea, June 19th, 1944. 220 American fighters climb to meet 750 enemy aircraft. 191 come back. They're flying the right aircraft, fighting the right fight, winning for the right reasons. The difference. A grinder's kid from Kentucky who refused to accept impossible, who asked, "What if we stop trying to fly better? What if we change the game?" Kellerman answered with engineering, 2,000 horsepower, 212 pounds of armor, 6 50 caliber guns, an aircraft that climbed like the enemy's best, dove faster, hit harder, survived longer. Duke proved it with tactics. Don't turn, don't slow down. Use altitude, use speed, use physics. Make the enemy fight your fight, not theirs. The result, 5,223 enemy aircraft destroyed, 19-to-1 kill ratio, the highest scoring naval fighter in history. Not because it was the fastest, not because it was the most agile, because it was the right answer to the right question. Not better pilots, smarter tactics, not lighter planes. Tougher machines, not more experience, faster learning. The question wasn't, can we fly better than them? The question was, can we change the rules? Dewey Duke Whitlock asked that question on a carrier deck after watching friends die. Frank Kellerman answered it with blueprints and rivets and an engine that wouldn't quit. Together they changed the air war over the Pacific. Together they proved that asking the right question matters more than accepting the wrong answer. The Hellcat kept its promise, brought Duke home 89 times in one day, brought thousands of other pilots home thousands of other times. The aircraft delivered, every time, without fail. This is what happens when you refuse to play by rules that kill you, when you ask better questions, when you find better answers, when you build machines that match the doctrine instead of doctrine that matches the machines. The enemy never knew what hit them, they reported it. American fighters climbing aggressively. But that wasn't the whole truth. American fighters climbing like theirs and doing everything else better. Faster dives, heavier guns, stronger frames, better radios, better coordination, better training, better doctrine, better questions. Keep these stories alive, because wars aren't won by brave men flying bad aircraft. They're won by brave men asking why the aircraft is bad and demanding something better. They're won by engineers who listen, by tacticians who adapt, by pilots who prove the doctrine, by institutions that learn. The right question changes history. Dewey Whitlock asked it. Frank Kellerman answered it. 5,223 enemy pilots paid the price for it. And somewhere over the Pacific, the ghost of every Hellcat pilot who came home remembers the mechanical thunder of the R-2800, the feel of armor at their back, the sight of enemy aircraft falling away, the knowledge that someone asked the right question, someone built the right machine, someone gave them the right chance. That's enough, that's everything, that's the legacy.